Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through dense sources to pull out the key insights, helping you get informed beyond the headlines.
And today, we're digging into a collection of essays covering what the author calls the raging 20s.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take on how global power politics, this idea of techno-feudalism, and the whole COVID era are all interconnected.
It draws some surprising links between geopolitics, economics, philosophy, even technology.
Our mission today is to unpack those underlying forces, explore those connections, and give you the tools to make sense of this complex time. So let's get into it.
Well, the author doesn't ease into it gently. They pinpoint a specific moment, a kind of opening shot for this whole era.
Right. The source kicks off the Raging Twenties with the assassination of Iran's Major General Qasem Soleimani back in January 2020.
And it's framed quite starkly as a murder that really inaugurated the decade, a prelude, potentially, to an epic clash.
Yeah, it sets a tense stage, and it immediately points to what the source sees as the core geopolitical fault line.
Exactly. The U.S. versus Russia, China, and Iran, these three are labeled the three major nodes of Eurasia integration.
And from the U.S. perspective, presented as major threats to national security.
It really positions almost everything else, geopolitics, geoeconomics, within that fundamental contest.
So it's like a new great game playing out across Eurasia. And it's not just about potential conflict, right? It's also about competing visions for organizing that vast space.
Precisely. You've got China's Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. The source highlights its long-term vision, looking ahead to 2049.
Aiming for what's the phrase, a new multipolar paradigm of sovereign nations partners.
Yeah, all interconnected across Eurasia, and backed by initiatives like Made in China 2025 to boost their own advanced tech.
Okay, so that's China's vision. What about Russia?
Well, Russia's Greater Eurasia project is presented as something that mirrors and, crucially, integrates with the BRI.
Ah, so they're not separate tracks entirely.
No, they converge. Think of bodies like the Eurasia Economic Union, the EAEU, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, the AIIB Bank.
Yeah.
It's all knitting together.
Which signals pretty close Russia-China coordination then.
Very close, according to the source. It highlights this complementarity Russia's military tech alongside China's techno-scientific progress, a powerful combination.
That strategic alignment really is a potential game changer, and the source seemed to zoom in on one particular area as a major prize within this Eurasian picture.
It does, Southwest Asia. Specifically, this idea of a connectivity corridor running from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Eastern Mediterranean.
Linking Iran, Iraq, and Syria, the author calls it a subsect of BRI.
Right, and this immediately raises the question the source explores. Why would the U.S. want to prevent this corridor?
And the answer given is?
China's deep investments in Iran and Iraq. Things like the Iraqi-Chinese Reconstruction Fund. The argument is that all those roads China's building across Central Asia, they ultimately aim to link Shanghai to the Eastern Med, overland, via Iran.
So it's not just overland routes either, is it? The ports are crucial.
Absolutely. Gwadar and Chabahar are mentioned as key strategic ports. And interestingly, India's involvement with Chabahar is noted too.
Yeah, the source mentions that Russia, China, Iran naval exercise late in 2019.
December 2019, yes. Described as a timely wake-up call for India, suggesting they can't really ignore Iran's central role in all this connectivity.
Okay, so Iran is critical here, especially for China.
Hugely important, particularly for energy security and trade. The source points out their bilateral trade moving towards settlement in yuan, or a basket of currencies.
Bypassing the U.S. dollar.
Exactly. Which the author contrasts with what they see as U.S. neocon dreams of regime change in Iran, partly to control the Caspian and disrupt China's plans. A kind of new Silk Road in reverse.
It really does feel like a clash of models, maybe even civilizational outlooks. Yeah. The source talks about the U.S. as a system leader.
Yeah, a civilizational power, even. And the belief among U.S. elites in its manifest destiny.
There's that striking historical comparison made between Pax Americana and Pax Mongolica.
Right, which, ironically perhaps, coincided with the golden age of the original Silk Roads under Genghis Khan's successors, before it eventually broke apart.
And the point being made now is
that unlike in centuries past, world-changing enterprises aren't really originating in the West anymore, according to this view.
And the source gives examples of direct challenges to this system leader status.
Yes, Iran's missile strike on the Ain al-Assad base after Soleimani's killing, and the downing of a sophisticated U.S. drone, a CIA BACN, in Afghanistan.
demonstrating the vulnerability of what the author calls the U.S. empire of bases.
A direct military confrontation, the source notes, unseen really since Pearl Harbor in terms of challenging the system leader so openly.
And then there's a cultural dimension brought in. Ezra Pound, Fellini.
Yeah, using Pound's phrase tawdry cheapness and Fellini's film A Dolce Vita as metaphors for a perceived decline in Western cultural depth.
A kind of hollowing out replaced by superficiality and financialization.
That's the idea presented. A cultural erosion that, the source argues, connects to anxieties seen at places like the Munich Security Conference.
Ah, yes, the concept of Westlessness.
Right. The source portrays the discussion around Westlessness there as almost a performance piece, a kind of Western nostalgia.
Nostalgia for what exactly?
For the days of humanitarian imperialism, as the author puts it. Uncontested military freedom, where Western powers could intervene pretty much at will.
But that view wasn't universal at the conference, was it?
No, not at all. The South Korean foreign minister apparently found the Westlessness theme rather insular, emphasizing multilateralism as more inherent to Asia.
And Russia's foreign minister, Lavrov.
He pointed out how Cold War rivalry structures seem to be re-emerging in Europe.
And China's response.
Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi offered a different vision altogether, moving beyond the division of the East and the West towards a community with a shared future for mankind.
A distinctly Chinese formulation of multilateralism, emphasizing equal rights for all nations.
Yes, but the source contrasts this sharply with the Pentagon framing China as the top threat.
Which Wang Yi called lies.
And evidence of a new kind of racism and new colonial approaches, in his words. It highlights this deep ideological divide. The author suggests Westlessness is almost irrelevant when China's rise and perceived U.S. decline are the defining realities.
Okay, so amidst these geopolitical tensions and clashing worldviews, the pandemic hits. How do different societies cope? The source brings in philosophy here.
It does, in a fascinating section called the Philosophical Silk Road. It draws parallels between Western Stoicism, Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Eastern traditions like Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism.
So ideas like ataraxia, freedom from disturbance, or accepting the inevitable.
Exactly. And concepts like owning only essentials, traveling light, how these Stoic ideals resonate with, say, the Taoist idea of wu wei.
Which is like action of non-action, right? Letting things unfold naturally.
Precisely. Or Buddhist ideas of impermanence, non-attachment to suffering, and Confucianism's focus on home integrity, adapting your actions when goals aren't reachable.
And the source connects these philosophical outlooks to how different societies handled COVID.
It explicitly links them to what it calls the relative success of Eastern societies in confronting the pandemic, suggesting these traditions offered a kind of cultural resilience.
Interesting. Now, shifting gears to the economic fallout. The source uses some pretty strong language. Controlled demolition.
It does, describing an accumulated collapse, supply chains, demand, consumption, investment, exports, mobility, all crashing down.
And the numbers cited are just huge.
Immense. The Asian Development Bank's $4.1 trillion global GDP hit, and the author thinks that's an underestimate.
The International Labor Organization predicting nearly 25 million more unemployed.
Millions facing working poverty. The global airline industry, a $2.7 trillion sector, basically grounded, and the WTO forecasting trade shrinking by potentially a third.
And this economic chaos is framed against what the source calls a hybrid war.
Yeah, between the narrative of the Chinese virus on one side and China's counter-narrative of the health Silk Road on the other.
And internally within the U.S. economy.
The source points to structural fragility. It talks about a de facto merger of the Fed and the Treasury, and the really striking rise of BlackRock,
the world's biggest money manager.
Described as becoming the new operating system for finance, controlling trillions and positioned for a fundamental reshaping of finance.
Which leads the author to ask a pretty sobering question.
Yeah. Was the economic fallout, the political and social cataclysm, actually a bigger catastrophe than the virus itself?
Wow. And this ties into an even bigger idea the source explores.
Right.
Social reengineering.
Right. It provocatively suggests the whole crisis could be seen as a sophisticated global psyop.
A psyop. To achieve what?
To use COVID as cover for ushering in a new digital financial system, it lays out a game ahead based on 3 pillars.
Okay, what are they?
First, social credit systems referencing China's 2014 rollout, focusing on trustworthiness, enabled by AI and IoT surveillance. Mandatory vaccination. It mentions Bill Gates' vision of digital immunity proof and the ID 2020 concept of a biometric digital ID from birth.
And the third pillar.
Digital currency. Tying it all together.
The author connects this to philosophical concepts, too.
Yes, to Michel Foucault's work on biopolitics, how the state controls life itself and the state of exception, where normal rules get suspended, allowing new controls to become normalized.
So planet lockdown, as the source calls it, isn't just about health measures.
It's framed as a massive social reengineering project. Full monitoring, population control, social distancing becoming the new normal.
There's mention of the age of haphophobia.
Yeah, widespread fear of touch, of physical contact, leading to this idea that the new border is each and everyone's skin. Homes become like detention centers.
That's a powerful image, and it points towards potentially new forms of social division.
Definitely. The source warns about a new viral paradigm creating segregation between immunity bodies and viral bodies.
And it draws historical parallels to drive this home.
Yes, citing Thucydides on the plague in Athens or Lorenzetti's frescoes of Siena depicting a city emptied by epidemic. The point is how crises allow the state to gain unprecedented obedience through biolegitimacy.
Biolegitimacy. Legitimacy derived from managing health crises.
Exactly. Which brings us to whether this pandemic signals total system failure or maybe the birth pangs of a new economic system.
The source suggests COVID acted like a particle accelerator.
Yeah, speeding up trends that were already underway.
So not just a crisis, but boosting an emerging economic model. What does that model look like?
It's centered on things like AI computing, automated manufacturing, renewable energy, solar, wind, 5G, nanotechnology.
And East Asian nations are seen as well positioned for this.
Particularly so, yes. The source emphasizes China gaining incalculable soft power through its handling of the pandemic.
How so?
By effectively containing the virus, using a strategic scientific approach, influencing global health policies, and advancing its Health Silk Road initiative. This boosts China's standing, especially in the global south.
But alongside this narrative of Chinese success, the source also looks at why China often faces demonization in the West.
It does. It traces what it calls the deeper roots of Chinese demonization way back.
Back to the Enlightenment.
Even then, yes. Things like chinoiseries, dismissing Chinese philosophy as just worldly wisdom, and then the development of racial theories, Bernier, Kant, Hegel, that assumed Western superiority.
Justifying concepts like Oriental despotism and the need for intervention.
Exactly. Which makes you think about how China might be drawing on its own history now.
Ah, the Ming Dynasty comparison. That was fascinating.
It really is. It highlights Admiral Xing. His incredible 15th century naval expeditions, the original maritime Silk Road.
Focused on diplomacy, trade, equitable exchange, not colonization, right?
That's the contrast drawn with the European colonization that came later, characterized by massacres, forced conversions, military outposts.
But then the Ming retreated from the seas.
Suddenly, yeah, due to factors like overspending, unrest, and a turn back towards inward-looking Confucianism.
And the consequence, according to the source,
China lost its technological edge and eventually suffered the century of humiliation.
So the lesson for today's China is
that Xi Jinping and the leadership have learned their homework. They won't pull a Ming remix.
Meaning they're committed to reviving both the land and sea Silk Roads this time, determined not to be isolated or humiliated again.
That's the argument, which connects to another key concept, techno-feudalism.
Right, from Cedric Durand. How does the source explain that?
It starts with the Californian ideology, the Silicon Valley mindset, a mix of right-wing ideas and Ayn Rand's philosophy.
Prioritizing pioneers, creative destruction, sort of thing.
But here's the paradox the source points out. U.S. digital dominance wasn't just spontaneous market magic.
It relied heavily on state support.
Massively. The military-industrial complex played a huge role. And now you have this extractivist logic of big data.
Where platforms become like fiefdoms.
Exactly. Controlling digital territory, exploiting data, leading to total concentration of power. The author presents a stark choice. Hackers or slaves.
Okay, so how are different powers navigating this techno-feudal landscape? Russia and China seem key here.
They're shown on converging paths, both pushing for economic self-reliance and major tech breakthroughs.
China's 5-year plan focusing heavily on AI, robotics.
Aiming to be on par with or even surpass the U.S. by 2035. That's the ambition.
And Russia.
Pursuing pragmatic policies, A strong state role in the economy, social programs, big national projects. The source even suggests Russia might overtake Germany economically.
And the key takeaway is that their combined approach is radically different from the West.
Yes, the Russia-China partnership offers two radically different approaches to the standard Western neoliberal dogma, something the source says is deeply unsettling to the U.S. establishment.
So Eurasia is being reshaped around these powers. The source talks about three sovereigns challenging the U.S. hegemon.
Russia, China, Iran as the key sovereigns alongside the U.S. Their clash is presented as the central story of the 21st century so far.
And Moscow's view of the U.S. leadership, at least during the Trump era, was pretty bleak.
Yeah, the source says they saw the administration as neither agreement capable nor legal capable. Basically unreliable.
This raises possibilities for new alliances, doesn't it?
It does. The idea of a definitive Eurasian alliance, maybe Germany, Russia, China, especially after Merkel is floated, a kind of modern Bismarckian reinsurance treaty.
And militarily, Russia's hypersonics and China's growing subfleet are highlighted?
As major strategic factors. And then there's the Hormuz factor.
How does that fit in?
It's about energy alliances, yes, but also about bypassing the dollar through merging payment systems like Russia's Mir and China's CIPS.
Solidifying Iran's role as that crucial Eurasian node.
Exactly. So you have this contrast, the imploding hegemon, as the source puts it, versus this ongoing, complex reorganization of Eurasia driven by these shadow play moves.
And into this mix comes the World Economic Forum's Great Reset initiative.
Presented almost as a counterproposal, a potential new operating system, but maybe a technocratic digital dystopia.
What's its stated goal?
To use the opportunity of COVID, combined with the fourth industrial revolution, to push for sustainable development.
But the source is critical of this.
Deeply critical. It sees the Great Reset's universalist ambitions as an insular Western-centric model that primarily benefits the top 1%.
Contrasting it with the BRI's supposed focus on growth for the global south.
Yes, contrasting it with BRI's emphasis on agro-industrial growth and longer-term development. The Great Reset is framed as a kind of ultimatum. You're with us or against us.
And it raises that question again. Was the COVID window of opportunity just convenient timing or something else?
The question is definitely posed. It all feeds back into this idea of a renewed clash of civilizations.
But viewed through this specific lens of competing narratives, historical, philosophical, geopolitical.
Right. The source uses Erdogan's reconversion of Hagia Sophia into a mosque as a contemporary example of these fault lines appearing.
It also mentions that debate between Dugin and Bernard-Henri Lévy.
Yeah, highlighting Dugin's critique of Western universalism and his call to understand otherness versus what the source portrays as Lévy's more simplistic demonization.
And it wraps up that section with something called the Mao Returns dialogue.
A humorous but sharp piece of Chinese online commentary. It reflects China's assertiveness and this ironic idea that maybe the Cultural Revolution is now happening in America.
So after laying out this incredibly complex, often bleak picture, where does the source leave us? What are there tools for navigating this?
It turns back to philosophy, drawing on Paul Preciado and Gilles Deleuze.
Deleuze's rhizome concept.
Exactly. The idea of a nonlinear network, not a rigid hierarchy, something with multiple entryways and multiple possibilities, creating lines of flight, opportunities for the shock of the new, even amidst chaos.
Offering a different way to think, perhaps.
Yes. It contrasts the poet, who speaks for creative power that can overturn orders, with the politician, who mainly wants to deny anything different.
Suggesting we need more poetic thinking, less rigid political denial.
That seems to be the implication. Perhaps acting more like poets offers a way forward as old systems potentially crumble.
Wow. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today, navigating the turbulent landscape of the raging 20s as presented in these essays.
From those deep geopolitical shifts and the rise of techno-feudalism to the philosophical undercurrents and the clear power struggles.
What really stands out is that contrast, isn't it? Between an established system seemingly struggling with its own fragility and these assertive alternative visions emerging.
Definitely. And as we're all bombarded with information, the source implicitly asks us to think critically.
Yeah, what kind of knowledge, whose version of truth is shaping this new normal? That's a crucial question for all of us navigating the raging 20s.
And perhaps the final thought for you, the listener, is how will you choose to engage with it all? Moving beyond just consuming information towards, well, deeper understanding and maybe even finding those lines of flight the philosophers talk about